first off, coming from Shauna Luhu, what would you say the difference between shunning, and cutting out toxic people from your life is?
That's a really good and valid question. I actually talked about this in one of my videos fairly recently, and I saw a lot of comments from people in my recent video about shunning that I did, about how I am 100% against shunning in all cases. Okay. Here's the thing about shunning. If somebody is being outright like harmful to you directly, like if they're being abusive in some way, they are de facto ending the relationship by acting in a way. Like if they're, if you're, for example, and they're telling you that your lifestyle is wrong and that you're evil and that you're wrong and everything you do is wrong, and they're just outright making your life miserable. You have no obligation to maintain a relationship that's obviously basically non-existent in the first place. You don't have to maintain a relationship with somebody who is making your life a living hell. There's a distinct difference between that and not talking to somebody or not interacting or cutting them out of your life because of some belief that they hold, and that's it. For example, I talk to Trump supporters all the time. Now, indirectly, Trump supporters do affect my life and my belief system and things. By supporting Trump, by default, in a lot of ways, you're contributing to a harmful system. I don't think that's not enough for me to warrant cutting somebody out of my life. If they are making your life miserable directly and harming you in some direct way, you have no obligation to maintain the relationship. I'll say that. I wouldn't even call that shunning at that point. Call it protecting yourself. So, and like I said, I did a video on this, a whole video recently. I'll put it in the description of this podcast and the clip that goes on YouTube. So give it a look if you guys want to hear more about this from me.
This one's coming from Glenn. What are you doing for Thanksgiving, and do you talk politics at the dinner table?
Interestingly enough, all of my family members, all of Kylie's family members who have basically adopted me, Kylie's mom's family, they almost all agree with me on politics. Like, we are all on the same page. I call her my grandmother because she's basically taken me in. Like, I lived in her house when I was kicked out and everything. She bought me clothes when my mom was no longer talking to me and gave me a ride to school and shit. So she is my grandmother for all intents and purposes. My mother, even. But anyway, her name is Sue, and she is a lifelong Democrat. Like, she is just hardline Democrat. Democratic Party all the way. Which has its upsides and its downsides. She falls for a lot of propaganda, for lack of a better term. She is, at this moment, I think, an Elizabeth Warren supporter, but she was a Hillary Clinton supporter for a while. Either way, it's better than being a Trump supporter. And we can find common ground, a lot of it. So I've never had an issue talking politics with somebody. Ever, really. Not with her, not with anybody in the family. But for this Thanksgiving, actually, I'm going with my girlfriend to see her family in Nebraska. And so her family's mostly on the same page, too. There's some variation, but I kind of fall into the cult deprogramming mode when I talk politics, where it's kind of a Socratic reasoning style conversation, where I'm just asking probing questions non-confrontationally, like I'm interested, like I want to learn and I want to know. Like, they have knowledge that I don't have and I want it. That keeps their guard down. And then I start asking some questions that kind of maybe poke a couple of holes in their ideologies in non-confrontational ways. So that's kind of the approach I take with conversations on politics. I don't think I've ever been in a fight over politics before, because I'm so non-confrontational about it.
This one is from Fumduck. How do we stop destructive cults from isolating people from the real world?
That's really complicated. One of the key ways that destructive cults use to keep people indoctrinated is discouraging access to outside sources of information. And I'm going to use this as an example. All right, I'll give you 2 examples of this, okay? Jehovah's Witnesses will discourage use of social media, say that social media is addictive and it's a bad thing, and it's just like using drugs in some ways because your brain gets addicted to it and you get involved in a bad crowd that way and all of that other stuff. And they discourage use of the internet at all, and they just keep escalating and escalating until they just want you to use only jw.org and things like that. It's kind of difficult to prevent people from using the internet entirely in this day and age, so they just discourage certain websites mostly, but they really lay down hard on the whole only use it for what you need kind of thing. So that's my first example of discouraging access to outside sources of information. They're okay with you using jw.org, their website. They don't want you using any other websites, really. Certainly not any apostate website. jwfacts.com, strictly banned. If a Jehovah's Witness finds that in your browser history, there will be a judicial committee, and you could have the rug pulled out from under you and be disfellowshipped for it. It's possible. So they take it really seriously. Here's example number 2. I know people aren't going to like this one, but you know what? This is a political channel to some extent. I talk about my political views, so I'm going to say this one too. Trump saying fake news all the time. Like anytime there's an article that he doesn't like, he says fake news about it. That's an example of discouraging access to outside sources of information. If a news agency doesn't say something that's positive about him or doesn't basically kiss his ass, then he will turn his entire supporter base against it. You know, CNN, NBC, ABC, whoever it happens to be. Right now, Fox News has been sucking up to him pretty hard anyways. So they've mostly been in the clear from this, but yeah.
This one coming from Seabird. What is your favorite Thanksgiving food?
I absolutely love turkey. I would kill a man for turkey. I mean, I would stab somebody in the chest for just a small piece of turkey. I love turkey and stuffing. But I would do it just for the turkey alone, no stuffing. In all seriousness, yeah, I guess turkey would be my answer.
This one's coming from your local Ginger. What's your issue with Trump politics, or Trump supporters, and why do you think so few agree with atheists /
Okay, can you read it one more time for me?
What's your issue with Trump supporters, and why do you think so few agree with atheists and rights?
Somebody else asked me a question just now in the chat too, and I'm going to package those 2 questions together. Do you think all Republicans are bad? I am a Republican myself, but I don't believe anything Trump says. No, I don't think all Republicans are bad. I don't think all Trump supporters are bad. I don't think any Trump supporters are bad, really. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but there are bad Bernie supporters. There are bad everybody supporters. I don't think you're inherently bad for being a Trump supporter. And I don't think you're inherently bad for being Republican either, or right-wing. I feel like what I said a minute ago was probably, I should clarify on that one. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, there were certain standards that we had to follow. First of all, women are not allowed to teach or have any kind of place in the teaching process, really. There were some certain specific exceptions to that. But generally, women aren't allowed to have a place in the process. You can't handle the microphones or the sound system. Basically, your only place as a woman is to hold a mop. You can't. There are absolutely no allowed in Jehovah's Witnesses. If you are, then either stop it or get out. That's pretty much their position on it. There are a lot of quote unquote social justice issues that are just thrown out completely as a Jehovah's Witness. It's a problem. You know, if you are not trans as a Jehovah's Witness, period. I don't care if you say you are, you're just not. That's their position. So when I left religion, when I left Jehovah's Witnesses, I discovered that a lot of those same mindsets that Jehovah's Witnesses have are the same mindsets that you get with other evangelical extremist kind of Christian religions, and even Islamic. Just general extremist religions kind of view things that way. In large part, the Republican Party is made up of those people, of the evangelical Christians, of the extremists. Now, I'm not talking about conservatives here. I'm talking about the Republican Party specifically, and Trump supporters specifically. A lot of the time, you find this general trend where this is the mindset that you find behind these two groups of people. Obviously, there are exceptions. This is not a black and white issue. There is almost no issue is black and white. When it boils down to it, there's nuance, or there should be nuance in everything. So don't think that I'm calling out every Republican. I'll never, talk to or deal with them, or every Trump supporter. They're all this way or that way. It's not like that. Like I said, my brother is conservative. I have friends who are Trump supporters. I have no issues with people like that. But I've found that as a general trend, a lot of the time, what you'll find is if they identify as this thing, then a lot of the time, this kind of profile comes with it. And it's a profile that I found in Jehovah's Witnesses and Pentecostals and evangelicals, Dominionists, so on and so forth. So, no, I don't have an issue with Republicans or conservatives or Trump supporters. I just noticed that this is something that you can kind of expect from a lot of the people. Generalizing isn't okay. So every time I go into a conversation with somebody, if they tell me they're a Trump supporter, if they tell me they're a Republican, I'm not going to assume this stuff about them on a one-to-one basis. Statistically, you can look at the statistics and see that these, if you're in this group, then you probably feel this way. If you're in this group, you probably feel that way. But on an individual basis, I don't go into any conversation with any assumptions. That's really how it should be done. That's how it's done in debate format. You always want to define your terms. You don't ever want to straw man your opponent's position or any of that stuff. You want to make sure you're all on the same page if you want to get down to the truth. If you're looking for the truth of the matter, make sure you're all on the same page.
This next question coming from a cringy trap. Would you rather be friends and eat with a Jehovah's Witness or a Latter-day Saint?
Would I rather be friends with... would I rather be friends and eat with a Jehovah's Witness or a Latter-day Saint? Was that it? Both. I would love to be friends with both. I think that would be great. Problem is that Jehovah's Witnesses won't be friends with me. They won't even talk to me. So that one's out. I guess the Latter-day Saint. Like I said, I'm willing to be friends with everybody. I don't care what you believe. I'm willing to be friends with you, and we'll work it out. And we'll sit down and we'll have a conversation, and we will feel each other's positions out and figure this out together. And we'll find common ground and figure out where or how we can get along. That's part of my deprogramming techniques, and that's just how I do it. Like I said, I've never argued with anybody over politics as far as I can remember. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I'm trying to make a shirt design for every cult I've covered. I haven't gotten every one, but I'm working on it. So check it out and see if your cult is up there. Second, you can support me by checking out my game shop. I sell controller, cartridge, and game box stands for every system from the original Nintendo and Sega Game Gear to the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. So give that a look too. And finally, if you want to support me in some way other than monetarily, you can check out my other YouTube channels. I have a retro game channel where I answer questions like, why does Shy Guy have a mask? And why are CRT TVs the best way to play retro games? I also have the podcast where I talk about stuff I don't feel I can say on a monetized channel. And finally, I have my main channel where I talk about cults. I wish I didn't have to worry about dancing around subjects carefully in the first place, but I chose to do this as a full-time job. So unfortunately, I rely on YouTube's AdSense and on the the support of patrons to continue doing the work I do. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.